We've got a busy schedule, itinerary for today, so we will get started. Starting with item number 1, the discussion of a development plan revision proposing 900 dwelling units, 450,000 square feet of non-residential uses, 400 hotel keys, and proposing 4 additional modifications of standards, both non-residential and mixed-use structure roof forms and prohibited signs on 27.19 acres located south of McEwen Drive and west of Carruthers Parkway. That's the Orium PUD. So I'll start with staff presentation.
Thank you. I do want to say at the beginning of this that we will be discussing the traffic study for both Orium and Ovation at 5:30. So if you have any comments or questions about traffic studies, those will be kind of relegated to that time. In regards to Orium, there are no major concerns with the proposed plan, but as stated, there are 4 MOS requests. I'll go through those quickly, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or the applicant can discuss them. MOS number 1 is to allow pitched or gabled roofs for non-residential and mixed-use structures. This is a staff-supported MOS because it's currently allowed in today's zoning ordinance. MOS number 2 is to allow a maximum of 3 digital or interactive wayfinding screen panels. This type of sign is prohibited within our zoning ordinance, and the request does not meet the intent and purpose of the signage section of the zoning ordinance. As is the case for MOS number 3, which is to request for the allowance of neon lighting and LED lighting. This type of sign is prohibited within our zoning ordinance, and the request doesn't meet the intent and purpose of the signage section of the zoning ordinance. Lastly, MOS number 4 is to allow string lights as a lighting source in specifically designated areas. This is staff supported because it is currently allowed in today's zoning ordinance. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Is there someone here representing the applicant?
Thank you. Glenn McGee with South Star, and we're the developers and owners of this site. And I want to first thank the Planning Commission, BOMA, our mayor, and especially the staff. We've been fortunate to do quite a bit of development in this area, and we've spent a lot of time with the staff. And, you know, we closed on this site in 2019 after getting it zoned, finished our zoning in the summer of 2019, teed up, ready to go. And like a lot of developments, the plans we had post-COVID were very challenging. And so we've spent a lot of times, had several meetings with many of you, certainly staff, to talk about ideas. And finally last fall, we sort of scrapped all of that, and we hired some of the best consultants we could find in the country. And one of our primary goals in that process was to say we want an executable plan. We had graded the site. We've got infrastructure in on the site, and we're moving forward with phase 1, which is on the southernmost piece that Greg will talk to you about. And so we have 15 acres left, and our goal is to do something that is special and is executable. We can do it today. It's financeable. It works. It's not something we're hoping will happen and comes to fruition in the next 5 or 10 years. So that's our goal. We feel like that we've accomplished that. And we're thankful that Greg and his team are a big part of that and working with those consultants, and he's our quarterback, and so we're going to let him present that, and I'm available for any questions. Greg?
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we make that full screen?
Yes, sir.
You know how to do that. Thank you. Hi, and I'm Greg Gamble, landscape architect and land planner with Gamble Design Collaborative, and really excited to be a part of 2 of the most exciting developments, I think, being proposed in Franklin in a long time. And Orium is first on the list. And Orium is a significant development within the overall master plan of Cool Springs. And for years, Cool Springs was void of placemaking, open space, and pedestrian connections. The city's guidance to envision Franklin and the encouragement of mixed-use master planning has changed the course of Cool Springs. Now evident with McEwen Town Center, the opportunity to design special places in Cool Springs is here. Envision Franklin describes this policy as high-intensity activity centers that attract regional attention. Current commuter traffic into Franklin is documented at 78,000 per day per the 2022 census. New plans must be designed for the pedestrian experience and should include open spaces and gathering with outdoor dining. Orium's master plan is designed around a grand lawn with generous sidewalks flanked by restaurants and retail, lush landscape, outdoor dining, casual seating areas, and offers an excellent opportunity to showcase public art. The park will be activated by planned activities, and it's expressive of the inviting personality of the new master plan. The park is centrally located, conveniently with access for pedestrians. This whole central block is planned to be predominantly pedestrian. This lane that you see between Gold Drive and Ovation Parkway will serve as a fire access lane, but it will have bollards and it will be pedestrian only. The parking area behind the buildings that are fronting onto Carruthers Parkway is intended for time-limited parking, ADA accessible parking, Uber Lyft pickups, and deliveries. This block will be the next phase of construction and will bring approximately 92,000 square feet of restaurants and retail uses shown here in red along the ground floor of the residential buildings. This yellow area right here will also be commercial. You'll notice that the commercial buildings are a campus of individual buildings. This allows us to have more diversity in architectural style and detailing and create buildings that are characteristic of the users that are inside. It also allows us to have more open space for outdoor dining and little nook areas around the campus. The first phase is this multifamily building here, just south of Ovation Parkway, and it'll start construction in just a few months. The plans are approved for that to move forward. On the corner of McEwen and Carruthers Parkway, this is the lowest elevation of the property. At the property corner, we're planning a decorative stone wall-lined pond, similar to the ponds that you may have seen at the Villages of West Clay when we were up in Carmel, Indiana. Just behind the water feature is a signature 300-room hotel with an outdoor courtyard overlooking the water for private events. The yellow building that you're seeing here just south of the parking garage is a mixed-use building with retail and restaurants on the ground floor to help activate the park, and office condos on the upper floors above. We're planning for an anchor office that's located fronting onto McEwen Drive, and it will share the parking structure located between the two buildings here. The experience along Carruthers Parkway is a critical component of the plan, where 2- and 3-story buildings with rooftop access that maintain a low profile, strong pedestrian connections from the front of the buildings out to the sidewalks. We see a lot of opportunity for along Carruthers for hardscape plazas, creating activity along the streetscape of Carruthers. This is a view from Ovation Parkway looking north. The architecture in the plan will offer modern storefronts with very traditional timeless building forms typical of Middle Tennessee. And this is another view into the park, and we love the addition of the rooftop dining on the upper floors of these buildings. I think we need more of that in Franklin. It's a lot of fun to have that in downtown Franklin. Love to see that more in Cool Springs. The new master plan maintains the same amount of retail and restaurant uses as the old plan, but it reduces the overall amount of office space from 750,000 square feet to 350,000 square feet. We've also reduced the number of hotel rooms from 700 to 400. We've increased the multifamily to 900. Now that HCA has purchased the property on the west side of Orium Drive, we see this add as very complementary to their future offices. Also not changing is Orium's add to the mountain bike park. Orium is adding this property just to the north of John Henry Carruthers' house, and you can see the connectivity of the mountain bike trails all the way to Liberty Park. This is one of many of the amenities that are going to be added and that are in the master plan for Orium. Each multifamily building will have a swimming pool, courtyard, fitness area, and open space courtyards. The reduction in intensity in the master plan, the overall traffic volumes projected for the new development have been reduced. They've dropped over 3,900 trips, dropping 110 trips in the AM peak and 333 in the PM peak hour. The off-site road improvements for Orium are staying the same. There are no changes, even though the traffic volume is reduced. The off-site road improvements for Orium that are shown here in red, those are currently under construction and include 1 right turn lane and 2 left turn lanes on McEwen and a right turn lane on Carruthers Parkway. Concurrently with Phase 2, Orium will be constructing 2 new right turn lanes on McEwen, a right turn lane on Carruthers into the first right in, right out, and 2 left turn lanes into Ovation Parkway from Carruthers. And Jimmy Weisman is going to talk more about that in just a minute this afternoon. We are very excited about the new plan, and we look forward to starting our Phase 2. The development plan is scheduled to be on the July 24th Planning Commission meeting. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. So, does anybody have comments? Comments, questions?
Explain one more
Alderman
time
Potts.
what phase 1 is.
Absolutely.
I think I looked down and went to sleep during that.
Hope not. Phase 1 is just south of Ovation Parkway right here where I have the cursor.
All right, thank you. Build the people in before you build a commercial.
Sure, we're starting from the south and work our way up.
Okay, Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir. Greg, did have a question. In your presentation, you mentioned timed parking. Could you define that a little bit more? Are we talking, is that timed paid parking? Is that
No.
just timed parking limited to a certain
Limited
amount of
to
hours?
a certain amount of time. You know, I don't know that we'll necessarily have a police presence here, but what we want it to be is that short, quicker turnover time, that if somebody wants to run into the coffee shop, grab coffee, and get back in their car and go, that they would have the opportunity to do that. It's more out of convenience, really, than it is about policing.
Okay. And then follow up, the pond that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's tough to get the scale here, but about what is the size of the pond?
It's, I believe it's a couple acres in size. Do I know that right? 2.5 acres? I think that's right.
Okay. And is it going to be aerated with fountains to prevent algae growth and things like that?
We'd like to, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
That's
you.
a strong aesthetic piece on this corner that we want to make sure it's beautiful.
Okay.
So that pond, just to follow on that question, that pond is designed as a wet stormwater feature?
It's a wet pond, wet stormwater feature, but we'll have freeboard in it,
Right.
where it'll also capture stormwater.
Okay, okay. And your opening slides, you showed, a great park, but I'm not sure exactly where that fits when we
It's
look
this,
at an
it's this
overall.
park right here that's flanked by the restaurant and the
Okay.
retail buildings.
Right next to the retail,
Yeah.
okay. And the residential. Okay,
Yep, I can go back to that rendering there. Here.
yes. Okay.
So you give that open space to encourage, family play, just being able to get outside and being a great park that's surrounded by activity.
Okay, and that's orientation is looking kind of south from that point?
Yeah, it's looking from the yellow building in.
Okay,
It's standing on the street right here, Gold Drive, looking into the park.
okay.
Chair, I did have one other question, sorry, from my notes here. Greg, could you address, as you were speaking to the parking structures and how it's going to be addressed visually, so that if you're at the corner of McEwen and Carruthers Parkway, and let's say you're looking back over the pond, you'd be looking at one of the faces of the garage structure.
Yeah, the zoning ordinance requires that all parking structures visible from those arterial streets are designed like a principal structure. So it'll have vertical windows, it'll have brick finishes or stone finishes. It has to be designed in a similar way to the office buildings.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I have is about walkability and bikeability. As this area becomes a little bit more congested with development, want to make sure that we're being intentional about how, especially you're putting multifamily here, how are we supporting those folks in ways maybe where they're not getting in the car?
Sure, and that's one of the very first things we thought about in designing this plan, why there's not a road cutting from Gold Drive through Ovation, is that we want to encourage that pedestrian connectivity. I know that on Ovation Parkway, there are existing pedestrian crosswalks that are there now, and you have the 12-foot Greenway Trail that is on the east side of Carruthers Parkway. And that Greenway Trail continues down Carruthers, I think ultimately all the way to Ladd Park one day, once the Greenway Trail continues to be constructed. So it's exciting that that much thought has gone into the pedestrian and bicycle circulation within this area of the city, and that we can participate and be a part of that.
I guess, would we think to join that trail, or would they join at the intersection of Ovation and Carruthers? Is there, and I assume we have a bike crosswalk.
The trail right now goes from Liberty Pike all the way up past Nissan. And they would absolutely have connectivity, whether it be at McEwen and Carruthers or at Ovation and Carruthers.
Thanks.
Yes.
I have a question, just kind of on, for bike access and all. You have plans for the extension of the mountain bike trails. If somebody comes and wants to specifically visit that trail and has their, brings their vehicle over there, is there set aside parking for that?
There is at the John Henry Carruthers house. There's a trailhead. There's also a bike repair.
Can you
There's
point that again?
Yeah, John Henry Carruthers house is right here. It's off of
Okay.
Huffines Ridge.
Okay.
These are
so
great
it's
trails.
adjacent.
If you haven't been, I really encourage it to go and go hike. And then at Columbia State Community College, there's designated parking for trail access in those locations
Okay,
as well.
that makes sense.
And then obviously over at Liberty Park.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Mayor?
Go to the modification standards, particularly the lighting, and my memory serves me that whenever we were looking at the property on the corner of Cool Springs and, I guess that's Mallory. No, that's not Mallory. Carruthers, the Hilton Hotel, we had a lot of signage requests at that time, and I think the point I'm raising is, when are we gonna fix the sign ordinance to reflect more modern, things like I think this is trying to reflect?
I can let you know a little bit about that. We have not put together a scope of work for that at this time. It is quite a large undertaking and would be a budget request, but we can prepare that for the upcoming budget year if that's something that's generally requested by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Planning Commission. We can certainly do that. We didn't have consensus during the last year's round of zoning ordinance updates related to signage, that we didn't have the general consensus that there was a direction to move in that way at that time. But if that is something that the group wants, we can prepare that for the next budget year.
Well, I'm looking at modification standard too. I'd like to know how to get to where I'm going in all those. So it seems to make sense to me. And I'm not sure about the neon lighting and LED lighting. Again, that's probably more reflective in my mind of more modern design. Some direction we probably need to move in.
We can have some discussion in the winter time to really try to hone in on what the desires of the Board and Planning Commission are for a signage ordinance so that we can prepare a scope of services. We really need, as staff, to be able to understand what types of changes are warranted. Our signage ordinance is very traditional now. And so if there are particular types of signage that are desired by the board and the planning commission, staff would really like to have a better understanding of what those types of signage are so that we could prepare the scope adequately for a consultant.
Maybe some retrospective looking at what we did at the Hilton would give some indication at
Okay.
the corner of Mac Hatcher and 96, where we had the halo lighting. So I think we're going to continue to see this because people are wanting to have something that's more attractive
And we are moving forward with some minor signage updates to the ordinance with our zoning ordinance text amendment this year. Halo signage is included in that. Irregularly shaped hanging signage is likely to be included with that. So we are making some tweaks based on signage modifications of standards that we've received at the factory, at Meridian, where you were just discussing, and with some of these other requests, but really getting into internal illumination, neon signage, and moving signage is something really outside the scope of what our staff expertise lies in, and we would need a consultant to come in for those.
Why wouldn't you just take the previous approvals of the modification standards regarding signage and use that as a guiding principle to modify?
That's what we've done to this point. We have not had many approvals, maybe just one that I can remember regarding the directional signage specifically, and that was at Meridian, I believe. Is that right, Chelsea?
That's right.
I don't believe it was interactive.
Okay.
It's a stagnant screen, but yes.
So at this point, we've taken the ones where we have had more than one approval for, and we're incorporating those into this year's zoning text amendment. It's really some of these more neon, internally lit requests and moving signage that we have not gotten a lot of direction in the past. So we can bring that forward over the upcoming months towards the late fall, early winter.
If I might, because if I remember correctly, we had a project that had a lot of requests for signage modifications, and we, as a planning commission, did not approve most of them. So if let's be mindful of that, because we sat through a whole lot of time going through each and every one of them. So let's just remember that.
And I think the board maybe did approve.
Yeah, the board may have, but as a planning commissioner, I remember us going through that. So you guys control the purse strings, but let's just remember as a planning commission, I remember us agonizing over all of those. So I really don't want to have to do that again. You guys do that, but I remember doing every one of them.
Greg, if anybody knows this process as well as you do, as well, you ought to send an amendment to us. That would solve a lot of the problems.
Maybe not.
Staff.
Sorry I brought the sign.
Yeah.
I am.
Staff
I definitely
prefer-
am sorry you did.
Zoning ordinance text amendments do originate with staff, so we have taken the guidance from you, and we'll bring something for you for discussion in the future.
Okay.
Wayfaring signs also, because, wayfinding signs, because if people are walking, then they want to have a sign telling them what is where and everything. And I think we have approved some of those.
Okay. Alderman Caesar?
Them, and I think one of the areas of resistance that I felt on the board about digital signage was, would they be used for commercial purposes? And would they become advertising banners? And the one that we approved in Meridian was just a static, find your place, this is where these things are. So look forward to seeing more information from staff and be able to provide clarity to the development partners, because it does feel like signs with technology advancements and the ability to inform the public, especially when you have live-work kind of communities, is something that we need to be cognizant of in the city.
Okay, and I think too that the concept of considering additional signage types, some of the stuff like that we considered at Meridian may have been suited specifically for that development. The architecture there, the new restaurants that were proposed, I don't think they represent a model for us to take on citywide, but they certainly represent, an option to consider new and different types of things in an appropriate place. Okay, we've got just a few more minutes if anybody else has any questions on this one. Okay,
Well, thank you all very much.
thank you, Greg. Okay, item number 2, the discussion of a development plan revision proposing 1,564 dwelling units, 1,655,000 square footage of non-residential uses, 350 hotel keys, and 9 modifications of standards addressing roof elements, window openings, building elements, primary materials, retaining wall height, retaining wall plantings, and parking structures on 103.933 acres located at the southeast corner of East McEwen Drive and Carruthers Parkway, this being the Ovation PUD. Staff.
Thank you so much. Again, the traffic study will be discussed in conjunction with Orion PUD at 5:30. The applicant is working with staff towards a finalized shared parking analysis. Within the parking study, the applicant is still contemplating whether to assign 24-hour reserved parking to multifamily units or to include these into the shared parking pool of spaces. With that said, the applicant is continuing to work with staff through several utility layout and fire access issues. And as stated, there are 9 MOS requests. I failed to say this with Orium, but I assumed that you saw it, that I provided a cheat sheet for you to reference just with some additional information. So I won't read it word for word, but I'll give you a small summary of each MOS and staff's opinion on it thus far. MOS number 1 is to allow flat roofs with parapets for townhouse building type. We are inclined to support this at this time because of the precedent set by Orium across the street. It's contextual with what will be existing there. MOS number 2 is requesting to allow a minimum window recess of 1.3 feet when applied to a board or panel siding. This is in specifically the multifamily building type, but MOS number 3 is also for the same request for the commercial mixed-use building type. Staff understands the challenges of construction, but are still concerned about creating an overly flattened facade. Their request doesn't allow for much shadow or contrast, and when utilized across large surfaces, it can lack depth and interest, so staff suggests attention to architectural detailing to compensate for this. MOS number 4 is a request to allow retail storefronts on commercial mixed-use buildings without transom windows and or knee walls. Staff does not support the MOS for the knee walls because they provide a base and define a more traditional classic design which addresses the purpose and intent that's written into the ordinance for the commercial mixed-use building. MOS number 5 and number 6 are similar in that they are requesting an additional material, which is precast concrete. MOS number 5 is for large-scale office buildings, and MOS number 6 is a request for commercial mixed-use buildings. In addition to that precast concrete material request, for commercial mixed-use buildings, they're also asking for the ability to allow up to 3 materials as opposed to 2 when office is a primary use of that building. Staff hasn't been provided enough information by the applicant to support this request at this time. For MOS number 6 for commercial mixed-use buildings, this information that we haven't been provided would include how the primary use of office would be regulated in commercial mixed-use buildings to allow for the use of 3 different materials as opposed to the 2. In addition, because precast concrete's not allowed in our current zoning ordinance, its regulation has not been contemplated. MOS number 7 is requesting to increase the maximum height for one retaining wall located behind Building J. I included a picture that shows the about location of that retaining wall. Staff hasn't been provided enough information by the applicant to support this request. The zoning ordinance allows for the use of tiered retaining walls, and this has not been investigated or presented as an unrealistic solution to having a 22-foot wall on the site. Staff has also identified 4 other retaining walls that exceed the maximum height, And these have not been included in the MOS request, so we're asking for additional information on that. MOS number 8 is requesting to eliminate the requirement of plantings at the base of the retaining wall behind Building J. The wall is placed near an established riparian buffer. Staff is inclined to support this request primarily because there is an existing riparian buffer there. MOS number 9 is requesting to place a parking structure parallel to the Carruthers Parkway and the McEwen Drive right-of-ways. Staff does not currently have enough information to support the parking structure parallel to McEwen Drive right-of-way. It's in yellow because if necessary support is provided, I think that we could consider support for this item. Staff does not support the parking structure parallel to Carruthers Parkway right-of-way. The zoning ordinance clearly requires that where along an arterial or collector street at or above grade parking structures shall be screened by buildings at least as tall as the parking structure to activate the street and provide visual interest. The Carruthers Parkway structure contradicts the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. In addition, the adjacent development, Orium, has found a way to locate all their proposed parking structures internal to their site. These are all of our comments, but as staff, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay. Turn it over to the applicant.
I can get pulled up for you.
I just got too excited before.
Okay. There you go.
Good afternoon. I'm Alec Chambers. I'm the market leader for Highwoods. We've been an active developer and operator of office projects in Franklin for many years, and really appreciate our relationship with the city as well as our good neighbors like Southstar. With me today is Taylor Wells, who's our local head of development, and he's also a former architect at Hastings. So I'm going to call on him if you ask any hard design questions. We've also got our partner with us, John Paul Wardy, who's the CEO of CenterCal. They'll be our partner for the retail and multifamily components of the project. And we've also got several of our consultants, Greg, who you obviously know, Ryan McMaster, I think Eric is here from Hastings, so we've got a team. While Ovation has been on the city's radar for over a decade, we're really excited to come and show you the new envisioned and reimagined version of the project. To be more consistent with the current version of Envision Franklin as well as the market. As you probably know, Highwoods has owned about half the site for over 10 years. It's where we developed Mars Pet Care's headquarters. We bought the other half after a long saga about 3 years ago, which is important because we now control our own destiny. And it's now time to move forward. We've got a great partner, and it's just time to go. And our intent with the change to the existing PUD is not to change the uses or functionality of the project, but to integrate the uses in a much better way and again, match the thoughts behind Envision Franklin. So we're very excited about that. We've brought in a best-of-class developer in CenterCal. They develop these kind of projects across the country. And together, we've brought in an obnoxious number of architects and designers to really give us a chance to design for the future while keeping an eye on the past. And to make sure that our design is elevated, particularly on the east side, which is, I know, particularly important to Alderman Berger, who's not here tonight or this afternoon. But so, our goal is to elevate well beyond what is required of us. Finally, I'd like to add that our changes, modifications of standards are not intended to skirt the zoning rules of Franklin. It's just to give us the ability to avoid this giant homogeneous project with a diversity of architecture. The scale of the project is significant, and we really need some of these modifications so that we can have it look like it was built over time, different materials, different design. The building, even a single building should look, our plan is to have it look like it's been here for a while. So with that, I'll turn it over to Greg and look forward to any questions y'all might have.
Thank you, Alec. My name is Greg Gamble, and excited to be the one selected to be able to present to the Planning Commission and Board. Alec wasn't kidding me. I think there are 5 architects I think that we're working with on this. We've had a lot of design charrettes and conversations about new design. I'm going to skip past a couple of these slides, but again, Ovation is located just south of McEwen and on the east side of Carruthers Parkway in the Cool Springs area. I'm going to talk about the old master plan in just a minute. At the center of the Ovation development plan is a 2-acre central park that's been intentionally designed for community gatherings, lounging, programmed events, and strolls through the park. The park includes an outdoor movie screen, outdoor dining, a grand lawn, and a food hall. The ground floor of these 2 buildings shown here offer additional restaurant space and specialty retailers that are adding to the activities within the park. The park is the hub of the proposed development and creates a community open space within the urban framework. The Ovation Master Plan embraces the intersection of McEwen Drive and Carruthers Parkway with a signature and iconic hotel with architecture that's setting the tone for Ovation. There are multiple access points to navigate throughout the master plan. The Ovation Central Park, just like the square in downtown Franklin, can be accessed from multiple directions, but the arrival at the park says you've arrived at the center of the master plan. I will point out, too, that there are multiple right-in, right-outs, one on McEwen, one on Carruthers Parkway. Those are fixed. They're constructed today. There are access points that are along Ovation Parkway that are also constructed today. So we've had to design this master plan in a way that met some of the existing infrastructure that was already constructed for the property. And while the streets and buildings within Ovation create an urban pedestrian-friendly streetscape, the master plan is flanked by 29 acres of open space to the south, an 11-acre created wetland park along McEwen Drive, and Franklin's Liberty Park to the east, making this an urban oasis bordered by protected open space. The buildings that are shown here in pink offer ground floor retail and restaurants to activate the streetscape with convenient pedestrian access from interconnected sidewalks. The distance from Carruthers Parkway to Ovation Parkway along this retail corridor is approximately 1,700 linear feet, which is the distance from First Avenue in downtown Franklin to Starbucks. It's that same distance. The upper floors of these buildings have a mixture of uses, including a hotel over Building J, shown here, mixed use in buildings C and G on the upper floors, multifamily shown in yellow over the Main Street, and office that's shown here in blue, both on the west side of the master plan and across the street from Mars. The mixture of residential and office uses in the master plan are critical to daytime activity and evening success of the restaurants and retail uses. The buildings that are shown here in orange on the south side of the master plan are a mixture of for-sale condominiums that face Ovation Parkway and townhomes that face back toward the hill and mountain bike park. A lot of discussion has been had by the Ovation design team about the next evolution of architecture in Franklin and the Cool Springs area, with a focus on using architectural principles of timeless design style and architecture that keeps Franklin. This is a perfect example of architecture that could have been built today or 100 years ago. And to point out one of our modification of standards requests, these are, this building facade here is hardy board panel. And so you can see how the contrast between having the brick facades where the windows are punched 3 inches and then hardy board panel where the windows would only be recessed about 1.3 inches back. I think this picture kind of starts to illustrate that. We know that with the modification of standards, we have more information that needs to be provided to staff, and we're working through that now. The streetscape is planned to embrace the pedestrian experience over the cars, with wide, generous sidewalks, unique and safe pedestrian crossings, lushly maintained landscape, and easy wayfinding signage. This is a view looking from the hotel at the corner of McEwen and Carruthers back towards Central Park. The building on the right is a mixed-use building with outdoor dining along the street and residential above. You can see the attention to detail on the ground floor to continue an inviting pedestrian experience with sophisticated personality all the way down the street. Arriving at the Central Park is the Grand Lawn, where community comes together. This park will host community events such as movies, an ice skating rink in the winter, and playful activities for all age groups. There are intentional areas for outdoor dining, relaxation, and public art. The buildings that front onto the park are mixed-use buildings, with retail and restaurants on the ground floor to add to the amenities of the park. These buildings are programmed with office and mixed-use buildings on the upper floor to add to the daytime activity. In between these two buildings, here you see a parking structure. This is the parking structure that we've identified as really the primary structure for the restaurants and retails. We want it to be easily accessed. This is the glass tower for the elevators here to give access to the parking structure and the office building. In this image, the food hall is on the right. This will be a one-story building that will offer 3 to 4 boutique restaurants, indoor and outdoor seating. Fronting onto Ovation Parkway are the condominiums for sale. These condominiums will offer garage parking, condo flats with living on one level, roof access for the upper condos, and multiple ground floor entrances that highlight convenient pedestrian connections back to the restaurants and shops. In addition to the sidewalks on both sides of the street throughout Ovation, we have 12 and 16-foot wide greenway trails provided in key locations to reinforce the pedestrian experience. The trails along Carruthers Parkway will remain, and we'll have multiple sidewalk connections with access into the master plan. This heat map shows the varying heights proposed through Ovation. This is in regional commerce and has a 12-story height policy in Envision Franklin. The hotel on the corner of McEwen and Carruthers, though, we are capping at a maximum height of 8 stories because of its context. We're kind of trying to transition some of these heights back down. The office buildings that are shown in dark blue, those are planned in the development plan to range between 6 and 12 stories in height, with the exception of this one office building on the corner, which will have a maximum height of 10 stories because of its kind of transition back to the hill in that location. Other buildings throughout range in heights from 4 to 6 stories. The condominiums are 4 stories. The townhomes are 3 stories. The townhomes will be very similar to, kind of in keeping with the brownstones in downtown Franklin, but we'd want them to have flat roofs so that people can access the roof and have views out to the mountain bike park. The City of Franklin requires participation in parkland dedication for the city's overall master plan. That master plan does include this area here on the south as a part of the mountain bike park. The mountain bike park is approximately 29 acres. We have along McEwen a wetland park. This is a created wetland. And we're planning to add boardwalks, interpretive signage, plant material to support pollinator insects, and wetland aquatic diversity for groundwater recharge in this location. So we want to partner with a local college and their students to help write descriptive boards that can be placed out here permanently that talk about the urban ecology and the significance of having a wetland in this location in Franklin. Today, Ovation's approved master plan is comprised of 77.7 acres. The new proposed master plan includes an additional 27 acres inside Ovation Parkway, currently zoned RC12. The new master plan is designed with the guiding principles of Envision Franklin as a high-intensity activity center that attracts large numbers of people and employers both from within and outside of the city. It has a focus on being a major employment and revenue generator for our community and maintains a maximum height of 12 stories. The 27-acre RC12 area was not previously included in the Ovation master plan. It was set aside for development in the future without a fixed plan. Mars Pet Care office is located to the east of Ovation Parkway. It's right here, highlighted by my cursor. And it's also zoned RC12. Within the RC12 district today, 60% of the total square footage can be commercial, while the other 40% square footage can be multifamily apartments. In 2014, the traffic study identified 1.4 million square feet of office for the RC12 districts. This would equate to approximately 830 additional multifamily apartments by right in today's ordinance. The proposed master plan now includes the remaining RC12, and it shows a holistic master plan where office is incorporated into the campus and integrated with the residential and the commercial uses. The plan includes approximately 400,000 square feet of retail, stores, and restaurants, 350 hotel rooms, 1,225,000 square feet of office, and 30,000 square feet of entertainment venue. The master plan does increase the multifamily homes from 950 that were in the 77-acre plan to 1,564 proposed in the 104 acres. This does not increase the multifamily to the full potential of the RC12 district. It adds 644. And that's a combined total of for rent and for sale. The intent is that what is inside of the Ovation Parkway area here would be for rent, and then everything on the outside of that is for sale. In comparing the 2014 traffic study to the 2025 traffic study, the new master plan only adds 1,100 trips per day. The 32,000 trips per day from the 2014 study have been used in traffic design plans for the design of Crothers Parkway, McEwen Interchange, the design of McEwen Parkway since 2014. It remains critical to our team and to the city of Franklin that the proposed developments stay within the parameters of the 2014 study. As listed before, we have 9 modification of standards. We're going to continue to get information that the staff have requested to them prior to the next development plan submittal. Couple of key items to point out. We are likely to have a 10th modification of standards. This area here with the wetland and the fixed intersections, the fixed points of access around the block create a block perimeter that is about 400 linear feet longer than what the zoning ordinance would support. And so we're going to continue to talk through that. But because of those natural features, I don't know that we'll be able to get that block smaller. Lastly, regarding the parking structure that faces to Crothers Parkway, we understand that this building has to look like the other buildings. It has to look like the office and the residential context that it's in. This is not going to be a parking structure that just looks like a slab of parking deck after parking deck. This is the direction we're headed with an architectural design, and would love to have some input from you all tonight on the character of this garage. It is 4 stories and has 5 levels of parking. Ovation will offer significant economic contributions to Franklin's bottom line. At full build-out, we are anticipating the city will see a benefit of over $250 million in sales, hotel, and property tax annually. The next step for the Ovation Master Plan is to be on the Planning Commission agenda on July 24th. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Questions, comments? Yes.
Learned of phasing on the Orium.
Yep.
What is kind of the phasing that you
Sure.
foresee for this?
The first phase will be the construction of this road here, the park, the road out to McEwen, that right in, right out, and then the buildings that front onto that and the associated parking structures. So that little area right here would be phase 1. The 2 office buildings that are along Ovation Parkway, they're set up specifically in the plan that they can really go whenever there's a tenant ready for those buildings, that they don't have to particularly wait on a phase. They can go ahead and just start those when they're ready. Phase 2 would then be the second stretch of the retail restaurant storefront that connects back over to Mars. Oh, the condominium for sale. It will be phase 1 here on the west side, and then phase 2 would be the east side. So there is a component of for sale coming with the first approved site plan.
Okay. Commissioner Williamson?
Yeah, just wanted to touch on just a few of the modification standards. Mainly just, let's say, for the window recess at 1.3 for when applied to board or panel siding. I was looking kind of at typical images of that, and that's, you know, very typical residential detail for that. And I think I'd have to see kind of the applications. I know you hinted to a little bit in some of the renderings, kind of pointing to some of the buildings on there. I think the application matters a lot in that. If used in certain ways, it can really make it look flat and very, very cheap looking. But then used in other ways, I know North McEwen Apartments there does that, you know, very flat windows, almost in plain on board and batten. So I have seen this in some, you know, similar caliber developments used successfully. So I think that's something that I'd have to kind of see the application of.
And it's very normal that when you're using the panel, or whether it be hardy board panel or what, that you have trim around those windows.
Yeah,
and if the
exactly.
dimension was measured to the trim, it wouldn't be as problematic for us as the rule is that it's measured to the facade. And so maybe one thing that we can add is what is that dimension to the trim? We can add that as a part of the MOS so that at least we're getting some depth with the windows. We'll talk with our architecture team about that as well.
Yeah, I think just knowing a little bit more about that and how
Okay.
you're going to apply it would be helpful to understand that. And then kind of similar thing for, you know, precast concrete as allowable primary material. You know, I know there's different ways. A lot of us think of precast concrete as unfinished concrete, but I know too you can do a lot with precast concrete. You can make it look like brick. You can make it look like wood. So kind of understanding that and the context of that.
The K-Love, brand new K-Love building is precast concrete. And so when you drive down I-65 and you see that building, that's more in keeping with what we're talking about as an example. They were allowed to do it because they were part of the Reams-Fleming plan approved for Berry Farms that predated the removal of precast concrete from office buildings and mixed-use buildings. And so we would love to, this is a very large development, as I mentioned, from Carruthers Parkway to Ovation Parkway is 1,700 feet. There's a lot of opportunity for us to create a lot of different architectural expressions and design ideas. Are we going to have brick office buildings? Yeah. Are we going to use stone in some areas? Absolutely. We want just one more tool that we can add to the campus.
Yeah, and I know that's it can be a material, but it also can be construction type. And so for me as an architect, that's like this big, and I don't quite know what that actually means in context.
We'll try and get some more definition to that.
And Commissioner Williamson, I would add that staff is asking for more detail too, because since it was removed from the ordinance, we don't have any regulations that apply to it now to require scoring or different texture or anything like that. So the more the applicant can provide with their modification of standards, the more staff might look more favorably on it too.
Well, that's helpful to know, Emily. Thank you.
Yeah, and I noticed there was quite a few little question marks too, that the staff didn't have quite enough information. And yeah, I'll just kind of stop there and say same.
Chair?
Yes.
Well, that's what I was going to say. 3 of the 9, I was going to say to the applicant, that the staff has specifically said, we do not have enough information to support. So I would just recommend to the applicant to give them as much information as you can to allow them to support those 3.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Greg, I was trying to zoom in on slide 18 and look at the bottom right-hand corner. You were given the stats on the change from 950 units to 1564 units. I know you said this is an additional 644 units, but could you give us do you have a breakdown of what the change is from apartment units, townhome, and condo? Do you happen to have that?
We have for sale is, I think it's 194.
Is that
194.
Before or after?
224, yeah, 220 before.
There's a hilltop overlay, which is now gone, so it was kind of forced to be left over there.
Okay.
On the previous master plan, it's a little bit hard to see. You see how the architecture from the previous plan came up into this area right here? That's not prohibited in the ordinance anymore. Those slopes are too steep for architecture. Where we're showing this road now, that's about as far into those hills. So we have a lot more preserved open space in the new plan than on the old plan.
And so how many apartment units of the 1594, how many of those are apartment and how many of those are townhome and condo, do we know?
I do. $1,370.
Is the apartment units?
Yes.
And the townhome will be the difference? And how many apartment units was it before out of the 950, do you know?
Out of the 950, that would be 730
Okay.
that were in the PUD. Now, in the RC12 district, 40% of the total square footage can be multifamily. And multifamily is the only residential type supported in the RC district, so.
Okay. And then I had a question on, I'm going to skip up, I believe it's slide 16. And I was trying to zoom in on the, you've got your blue heat map here.
Yes.
But it looks like, if again, you got to zoom in pretty tight to see this, but at Carruthers and Ovation, the parking deck, is that the tallest? It's a 7 to 8 story parking deck is what you're anticipating?
Yes, it supports these 3 office buildings here.
Which is V, F, and D?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, yep.
I'll add on that deck, that's actually cut into the hill a little bit. So from Ovation, it won't look as tall, because Ovation is, I think, 85 feet from the park above. So we'll be able to cut off some of it, so we won't necessarily look that tall.
Okay.
Depends on which side of the building you're standing on.
Right.
Yep.
So Greg, I'm trying to get a sense of what this whole stretch looks like south of McEwen. So Ovation clearly appears to be twice the size of Orium.
I have it side by side. Would you like to see it?
Just and then the other big lot is marked is designated as HCA.
Yes.
Is there a sense of what HCA wants to do with theirs, or
Not that we know.
we just don't know? Okay. So if you do have a side by side, yeah.
So this is the, I'll turn it this way so you guys
Right.
can see the side-by-side relationship between, no, it's all right. Let's see how they sit on the parkway together.
So a number of these structures are designated as being 12-story buildings.
Yes.
Alderman Berger, there was a comment made before you walked in that you were concerned about elevation on the east side, and I'd like for you to address that a little more. There's some other, the building on the corner of Carruthers and Ovation is a 12-story building.
10.
It's 10? Okay. Is the overall mass of this development significantly higher than Orium is, or what's the kind of general sense of difference?
I think that this office building right here, we have a range on it that could be taller than 6 to 8 stories. These buildings here would be somewhere between 5 and 7 stories for those. The commercial buildings here are 2 to 3 stories in height. Some of them are 1 story if they're kind of the jewel box building. The hotel would likely be 7 to 8 stories in height.
Okay. Okay. Alderman Berger, do you?
Can I make one
Sure.
comment about my comment?
Yeah.
I actually said that I thought you were concerned about the design.
Can you go to the mic?
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep forgetting. That I think you were concerned about the design being elevated on the east side, not so much the elevation of the buildings.
Yeah,
That was just from a previous.
right,
uh,
right. I'm not a big fan of 12 stories. I'm just not. And, but if it's allowed, it's allowed. So, I would say if you are, the 12 stories are allowable, that you keep those at a very minimal, and I think you have. But the design has got to be critical in my view. And not, when you get on Crothers and you get on McEwen, especially Crothers, I don't want to look at this thing and see it lopsided. Tall buildings and all these short buildings, and I don't think your architect's going to do that. No good architect, and this company you're working with is stellar. I know their reputation is stellar. And I like the design. I like the rendition that you've brought for the layout. Yeah, I think it's pretty doggone good, but I'm still concerned. I go back there and I look at, I think it's a placeholder that you have in here for the parking garage. I was looking at it on this one. What page is that? It is 20 of 22. And hopefully that's just a placeholder, because whatever you do with that parking garage, it's going to be up front on Crothers. And I know you've got a lot of landscaping. I know you're back. How many feet, Greg? Is it?
It's about 35 feet.
Okay. Well, it's not much. In fact, that's not much at all. There has to be heavy landscaping out in front of that parking garage, but I think you need to break that parking garage up. And I don't think parking garages need to be over there at Franklin Park. That parking garage needs a lot of help. It's just cement. It doesn't look very nice at all. I don't think it gives a very good visual to people driving down the highway. And
So when you say break it up, you mean like make it look like it's
the
a collection
facades,
of buildings?
yeah,
Okay.
the facades, and I think red brick is just red brick. I think we're all sort of sick of that, and I think you need to really come up with something pretty stellar for that parking garage,
Okay.
because it's going to be fairly large and it's going to be right there on the corner, correct? And so I think it's critical how it's going to look.
Okay.
Because people are going to, and then you're going to cut that hill down a bit right there on the corner,
That's
right? So you can actually see the development.
Yes.
So that's another thing. So you're going to see that parking garage, and in it doesn't need to look like a parking garage, especially on the corner part.
Mhm.
So the volumes and the facade has to be dealt with. I'm still a little worried about 12 stories, but what can you do? I think we get a little crazy. So if you can keep that down a little bit, that'd be good.
I know we spent, a decade talking about, when we talk about structures on the east side of the interstate, we always look back at the Drury Hotel and try to get some sense of the relative height and the difference and things like that. So,
Yeah.
but it's still, just a concern that we don't have something that looks out of place.
There is
relative
about
to
an
everything
80-foot grade change from Ovation Parkway down to McEwen.
Yeah.
In that 80
How
feet,
much?
80,
80 feet.
about
Yeah,
80
it goes
feet. So you
down.
can imagine that all of these buildings are going to be transitioning down these grades. And so where it's 4 stories on one side, it might be 6 stories on the other. So when we talk about this number of stories,
Yeah.
6 stories, that's kind of the tallest side.
Okay. Alderman Caesar?
You have
True.
2 buildings flanking it, correct? And you're not showing an end
Front.
rendering of what those 2 buildings will look like with the parking.
Right, for the hotel and then the portion
So I
of the
think that'd be
building.
important to include a rendering to that.
Okay.
And then like Alderman Berger said, you could put some offsets in that parking structure to give it a 3D effect, and still have your continuing runway in there.
Okay.
Okay. Alderman Caesar?
Yeah, thank you. Agree certainly with what Mr. Franks and Alderman Berger have said about the parking structure. I assume it's just because it's a rendering. The last thing I want to see is a ramp from the road that denotes like there's obviously not people in there. It's a place to park cars. I worry about the proximity to the roadway. Breaking it up, as Jimmy was saying, I think will help me get a little bit more comfortable with that structure. The second question I had, much different topic. The more owned opportunities to own property in here, the better. You kind of have a little bit of a horseshoe shape in between the condo and the townhome. Is that for what is that space right there?
Right here.
No, to the right, in the middle of
Right
right
here.
there, yes, sir. And then it comes into, a little bit into the hill, maybe.
Yeah, this is one of our formal open space parks, and so it would be programmed maybe with a playground, but maybe a fire pit, something that gives people, maybe there's a picnic pavilion. I don't know exactly what we're going to program it with, but that's really what it's intended to be. A little
And the
neighborhood
space that
park.
comes even further south from there, Greg, is that in, are you
That's a part of
impeded
our
from doing
stormwater
something
controls.
because of
we
the?
have a lot of water that's coming
Okay.
off the hills, and so we're going to have to capture it there, slow it down, stop it, control it, contain it, and then slowly release it back. Everything's going to work its way north, and so just because of how much water we have coming off, we need to capture that.
Good question, because I was going to ask about, we're tearing up a lot of ground here and putting buildings on it, so we need to have some detention or water retention spaces. And then
That's right.
the third thing was around, and maybe this is just me understanding the map. We're still on slide 16, but where it says 4 to 12 or 6 to 10, is that due to the slope and what you'll see from grade?
In some instances, yes, but in other instances, we don't know if when Highwoods has an office tenant, if they're going to want X square feet or Y square feet, and so we put ranges in here very similar to Berry Farms, Chadwell, or even Town Center, where the building can range within a certain number of stories to allow us to react to the market over time and design accordingly.
And then the final question, I've hit you with a lot, I'm sorry for taking the extra time here, but the parking decks, some of them are wrapped, some of them appear to be just parking decks. Is the concept in these parking decks for it to be parking on level 1 all the way up to the top, or is there a mixed component in some of these parking structures?
I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure for all the parking structures, it's pure parking. We're not cutting in retail in them. And some discussion about transit, that we might end up doing something with that, particularly along Carruthers. We have a pull-in to have a lobby or that type of thing. But generally, these are designed to just be pure
Just parking.
Most of them are wrapped and covered, like you said. And the ones around the multifamily are primarily for multifamily with a touch for the retail. But we try to spread it out so that people aren't having to drive through the center as much, so we can close off some of these interior streets and have, Christmas tree lighting or an event, a movie, different things to really make it insulated.
Thank you.
Okay, last question, Alderman Potts.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is actually off of what Alderman Berger was just talking about regarding slide 20 and talking about the breakup of that parking structure. If you're going to be using different types of materials to give that visual change, I'd even like to see if there's any way to use different lighting on the outside of that structure, so it appears as though it truly is 4 or 5 different structures right there.
Yeah.
Good. Yes.
Wanted to, a couple things. I think it's important for the public to know this is already entitled, and so this is not a brand new thing for the community. So this was entitled
2014.
14. So this is not, could be done today in its current version. It's entitled to do. Not that you could do it, but
Right.
yeah,
Not in the exact current-
the market has changed.
It'd be,
Right,
the
understood.
office of the retail would be separate.
But entitled previously. So the 30 more acres roughly, and adding 279 AM and PM, around 200 PM trips. So traffic impact is minimal, and that's good. And I think that's what a lot of our constituents, that's what we hear, is traffic impact.
I think, in Jimmy's presentation he's about to give, I think will answer a lot of questions as well.
Last thing, building V, I echo, that I feel like you mentioned the height of the V and D, that is up the hill.
They
I
are
kind of wish
available.
the height was, I'd rather the height be lower. Does that make
higher you get.
the higher you get, and that way you're not putting the tallest buildings on the highest topography, which. So I think I've heard some, and then I echo the parking garage. I understand the constraints there, but it's got to either look like a building. It's got to look like a building. I mean, there's no either. Like it's got to look like it's got to look like these are structural. I don't want to turn onto that Carruthers and it look like a parking deck. I mean, that's the whole reason for the why we don't allow it. I want it to look like those are built. I don't want people thinking those are there's a parking deck right here as we turn on. I mean, if you're gonna ask for a modification of that standard, which is for good reason, because we don't want parking decks built on major thoroughfares, then you're gonna have to make it look not like a parking deck. So I would really want to see that come back and not look like I don't want people to know it. If we're gonna void that standard, then at minimum it has to look like a building, in my opinion. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Comment on that? Real
A very quick
Okay, I'll just, Commissioner Frank's comment about seeing what's going on around this, because there'll be multifamily above it, there'll be a hotel next to it. There'll be a lot going in where this will be camouflaged and just blend in and hopefully disappear with our design. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex, when you're looking at building the office buildings and stuff, because we've been having reuse of those office buildings and stuff, we've had that issue about, like Mars couldn't rent out certain spots because they had number limits because the stairwell wasn't large enough to get people down. So when you build those buildings, make sure you build them, those stairwells extra large, because that way, if there has to be a reuse of the office of how it's used, that's going to be really important.
Noted.
Okay. All right, our next item is the special presentation on the traffic issues associated with these buildings. So, staff presentation on traffic impacts related to REM and Ovation revisions. So, Jimmy?
Thank you. Thank you, Chelsea. First, I'd like to thank the South Star and Highwoods team for the collaborative effort, and their traffic engineers, their collaborative effort, and the speed at which they responded to comments and got things back to staff so we could have this ready for you today. We have the finalized, most of the finalized results, at least enough to discuss improvements on McEwen and Carruthers. And as mentioned before, REM previously entitled and came in with this amendment and reduced some trips with the changes in use. Touching on some of the improvements, some of those that they're doing, they're already under construction, is the eastbound travel lane on McEwen to Carruthers Parkway, and an additional southbound through lane on Carruthers Parkway to be constructed, and additional turn lanes in all directions. As mentioned before, the Ovation original PUD from 2014 has been included in every background study of every traffic study that we've done since then. So we've anticipated this. It was in the Cool Springs Transportation Study as well. So we've always had that number, which a lot of developers have had to bear the brunt of that as they've come forward before this plan. So through the joint traffic study, if you will, the Ovation plan, once it comes online, we've identified the need for an additional eastbound through lane on McEwen. That's a continuation of the one that REM has already built, and the need for an additional westbound through lane through Carruthers Parkway all the way to the interstate. And we're still working on the phasing and timing of those improvements, but just understand that we're talking about 6 lanes of through travel on McEwen in both directions across this frontage here. I would like to touch on transit, because if you haven't met him yet, Max Baker, our new multimodal coordinator, has been here almost exactly a month. Very excited to have him. He'll, at some point, I'm sure he'll be in front of this body. But we had a meeting with both teams this morning to talk about transit opportunities in the short term and in the long term. So more as that evolves and as we have more discussions, we'll be bringing that information to you as well. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Yes, sir.
At one point, several years back, you showed us a plan where additional lanes coming off 65 North were going to be required. I don't see that on this plan you're presenting today. I guess the question is, how close are we to that?
That's something that we're pursuing with TDOT. Honestly, federal dollars are more appropriate for expanding off-ramps of the interstate. So I don't have an answer with that. I can bring it back once this plan comes forward to the Planning Commission with more information, if you'd like.
Okay. Questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jimmy. All right. Item number 3, the zoning ordinance update topics, starting with streetlights. Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Bowman members and Planning Commission. This is part of the annual zoning ordinance update, the consideration of a slight change to street lighting. Thank you, Jimmy. This topic of streetlights in new residential neighborhoods was presented last year around this time, and the topic is back as there has been some increased collaboration with Middle Tennessee Electric. Just as a quick overview, streetlights in new residential developments are typically controlled by Middle Tennessee Electric. They provide the power, they maintain them, and they bill the city. Developers can opt out and have the HOA own and maintain the streetlights, but typically the developer complies with MTE's streetlight manual, which provides for a limited number of pole and fixture options, and that does help Middle Tennessee with their ongoing maintenance. In terms of the zoning ordinance requirements, the zoning ordinance limits the streetlight pole height to 18 feet and requires an ornamental style fixture. And then beyond that, subject to the street standards and MTE streetlight manual. On this slide, you'll see 7 fixtures, and these are the residential scaled options that MTE provides in their streetlight manual. The top row is the Granville, and it can come with a band around it and a finial. It can be plain or also just a finial. The Granville is very common throughout Franklin. You've seen it all over. The bottom row of options typically project light more downwards, although the lantern light is not very common in new development. It's more of an old style fixture. The Arlington you've probably seen in Gateway Village, in maybe some other places around town. The Town and Country is the only dark sky compliant fixture Middle Tennessee has in their catalog, and it is, I have not seen it in Franklin. And then the Memphis Teardrop is a nice looking light, but it's large, it's very substantive. It's better for collectors and maybe entrances into neighborhoods, so it's not really used on local neighborhood streets all that much. Since last year, Alderman Caesar and Commissioner Williamson have met with Middle Tennessee Electric on fixture options. MTE offered to add the Granville with a full cover as an option that developers could choose, and we have here today. Thank you, Jimmy, for putting that up there on the desk. A sample has also been installed on 3rd Avenue near the beautiful and recently opened Bicentennial Park Pavilion. So take a drive over there if you haven't. And then there's a second demo that's in Sullivan Farms. I would like to note that Middle Tennessee also offered to accept the plain Granville with a cutoff shield as well. This is a photo of the demo light installed by Bicentennial. In terms of next steps, there are really 2. We can formally ask Middle Tennessee to go ahead and add the Granville with the full cover to their streetlight manual. And then secondly, we can propose a zoning ordinance text amendment to include a preference for the fixtures shown below and when Middle Tennessee will own and maintain those lights. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we'd appreciate any feedback.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Williamson.
I would just like to thank staff and Alderman Caesar for coming together on this and just kind of the progress that's been made, and especially putting this in the zoning ordinance so it's kind of on the forefront when developers go in there. I think it's a fantastic move in the right direction for when we look at light pollution, especially going into the future. So thank you very, very much, both of you.
Sure. Thank you.
Right.
If I could, just real quickly. So this is, I think, a great example of collaboration between 2 bodies and with staff and with Middle Tennessee Electric to find a solution for a problem that many of us probably don't acknowledge, which is uplighting that creates light pollution, which disrupts some of the animals that live in the environment. I have the privilege of living across the street from one of the lights that has been recently installed. And this past week, most of my neighbors probably wouldn't even notice it's there because, if I'm not mistaken, it's the internal metal plate that we have in that one. which directs most of the light down where we want it onto the sidewalk and the surrounding areas. The neighbor who actually lives adjacent to this light fixture commented that their bedroom is now more comfortable at night because the light is not shining up into their second-story bedroom. And I think that's a reflection, pun intended, on what we're really trying to do with these two new options, whether the internal metal plate or the capped Granville with a full cover. So to your point, the only dark sky compliant solution that we have, the Town and Country, when we were recently looking at some of the lighting for the new City Hall, I believe that was one of the options that was placed temporarily outside of the City Hall and received no votes from support from anyone because of the way that it looks and doesn't necessarily fit the style that our community, I think, is after. So thank you for Jennifer for sharing her expertise and knowledge in this space, and Andrew, you and your team for continuing to move this forward. There have been no complaints from anybody in my neighborhood about the appearance or the light or anything negative surrounding this light. So thank you for putting it up right across the street. I get to look at it every day.
Andrew, I've got a question. When we say that Middle Tennessee Electric has a catalog, is that a selection of light fixtures that has kind of evolved over time based on the city of Franklin's maybe input or suggestions, or?
It is their streetlight manual. I did call it a catalog, but they basically have these 7 options for residential neighborhood streets. And I don't know that their catalog was ever really big in terms of options, but I know they've tried to shrink it down over the years to help with their maintenance, because the more light fixtures they permit and allow, the more things they have to stock, and makes maintenance a little more challenging. So they've tried to narrow it down. So just to get the Granville with a full cover, is no small feat.
I would say, Mr. Chair, generally, he's reluctant at best to look at a new light fixture. So we're grateful for their partnership in exploring this. And it makes a lot of sense. If you have 30,000 light fixtures across the area and you've got 45 different types, you got to supply not only maintenance, but then you have to have service manuals and all the complexity of it. It makes a lot of sense why they would try to shrink it. We appreciate them being sensitive to the asks to try to have a better, more appropriate night sky compliant solution for us.
Sure. Alderman Berger?
I just have a question on this one. This is called the Granville full cover, is that correct? Yeah, did you consider what happens to all that black on the top over time? The maintenance, because if I look at my light, just some of the stuff, the light outside my driveway in my alley, it needs painted now, and I just want to know about the maintenance on that black and the finial and the top, because you go down 10 years, is it going to fade out and look gray in 15 years, and are we going to have to go paint them all? And I look at the plain Granville and I go, oh, there you go, it's glass. I don't think you have to do anything to it. This, I think you got to do something to. So I'm just asking.
We can try to get some of that information from Middle Tennessee Electric. I would say it would probably wear at the same rate as the pole itself, so it probably will have some change in color over time, but it would be equal to that of the pole at least. And as Andrew mentioned, Middle Tennessee Electric is also they've also agreed to allow for the cutoff shields to be put inside the plain Granville or the Granville with the finial. So that's an internal shield that wouldn't be the same as having a painted piece on capping the top.
Mm-hmm. Well,
It's across from me and you don't notice.
this one here, that's
The clear one.
is that what's across from you?
And there's a piece internally to that, which also reduces the cost. This is a replacement
Yeah.
or new. The internal shield is a much more economically viable.
How does that function though? Is that if you put a bunch of those up, would you need shields in those as well? I mean, if you put all those on Franklin Road, we had to put shields in. So what if that was on Franklin Road? Would we have the same problem?
Not sure I understand the question.
So the lights that are on Franklin Road, they were so bright, we had to put shields in them. If you put 20 or 40 or 50 of these on a row, would you have the same problem, have to put shields inside those?
The light on Franklin Road is a lot higher powered light. That I think they use the Washington, and this is the Granville. The Washington's a bigger light, and I believe that throws out a lot more lumens and wattage.
Okay.
I believe it's up to. I believe the wattage was up to 400 for the Washington, and it's up to 250 for the Granville. So
Yeah.
the Washington's a bigger light.
Yeah, I think they were trying to say that Franklin Road is also an emergency runway for somebody.
That's right. That's right.
I think too, to maybe answer some of the questions, I think that's a valid question on the top if it's going to gray. I think that question is probably appropriate to the manufacturer to look into what warranties they have.
Yeah.
And maybe also a discussion with Middle Tennessee Electric that, hey, if some of these do have an issue, 10, 15, whatever that life expectancy, is it, in their rotation to replace aesthetic things that maybe aren't functionally broken? When you talk about kind of if you have existing lights on Franklin, like they said, it's a different bulb in there, just a lot brighter. But the main focus of the cap on the top of these and the internal shield is more for cutting off from light going straight up. So you're still going to have stuff projecting out sideways, because the ultimate goal is you want to safely light roadways and sidewalks and kind of give general illumination. But it really does help reduce a little bit the stuff going straight up.
Yeah,
And an example is like if you go outside and it's a really overcast evening and you walk outside, the sky is orange and that's all light pollution. And so this will help, like if you go off in a distance and you see, hey, there's like a big orange cloud over there and that's coming up from a neighborhood. If you were to put more cap fixtures in there or something that's working on that cutoff, that glow reduces. It makes it all much. So that's the main goal.
Yeah,
of
that
this
sounds very
direction.
logical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just have that checked out, because I think eventually you're gonna have to paint it or do something with it.
I think it's a good point. The plan was not to go and replace every fixture in the city with these in the next week. It was to provide us alternatives as we bring new fixtures on or as fixtures get damaged, to put something that would be more dark sky compliant that's not the town and country.
Chair, if I may, someone who used to work in utilities, for outsides, for slicks, for anything that is for the outside, that to endure things, think the paints, the coats and all of that are made to endure the snow, the rain, all of that. And part of the maintenance program, and the reason that you limit your catalogs, is because you do have someone, you have a maintenance, you want to limit the amount of training you have, and you have a maintenance program. As things begin to fade, and those things are weather-wise generally for 18 to 25 years. Now, does everything make it that long? No. But what do you do as part of your maintenance program? You go out and replace those. So as they begin to chip and fade and all that, that's part of your budget. And that's why you limit your program, you limit your catalog to go out and to replace those. So I don't think that we would, have to limit or should have to take the Granville Post top with full cover off of our desire list or off of our, that being what we want, because we're afraid that it will fade. That is baked into the program. So I think that we would be okay to ask Middle Tennessee Electric to do that, because people who manufacture these know that it's going to fade after time, and they have that in there. But I actually love it, and thank you guys for taking it, time out of your day to do that.
So are these?
Are they lead?
I-
Are they lead?
Are they LED? That's an option. I mean, with these lights, you can get all different types of wattage and lumens, and so you can do LED, you cannot do LED. But I believe Middle Tennessee is requiring it, or if they're not, that's just the way the industry has gone.
All right.
So our existing Granvilles that don't have the internal plates, can you retrofit those?
This would just be for any new development, so new fixtures coming online.
Okay.
But we could, yes.
The internal shield.
That was one of the discussions with MTE was to validate from the manufacturer that installing this down filter, the shield, wouldn't void the warranty.
That's right.
And they were able to get approval from the manufacturer that these could be used safely without compromising the equipment, so.
Good. Alderman Baggett, Alderman Potts.
Thank you. Yeah, first is, great job. I'm glad you were doing this. We've been talking about light pollution for a long time, so this is a good step in the right direction. I also, when we're talking about the shielding, it's also can be shielded on one side of the lamp as we've done. And so if we move to this, I would be interested to find out if it's an exterior shield that would go on it or if it would be an interior.
Yeah, it's inside.
It is interior. Okay, I just wanted to check on that. And then last, I'll say, Jimmy, it looked like you have received the Franklin Cup as you're lifting that up there. Stanley Cup to the Franklin Cup.
That's right.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you all.
Our next item is zoning ordinance update. The topic is the display of flags. And Kelly and maybe Joel will present on
Get
this.
it pulled up here.
Good evening. The display of flags is one of the topics for the zoning ordinance update as well. This is the next round of discussion following the initial scenarios that were presented this spring at the Joint Conceptual Workshop. Joel's going to walk us through this presentation, and he'll cover some background review the initial scenarios that were presented, and then he'll present a second round of options. All of our discussion tonight will be focused on the potential requirements around allowing additional temporary flags beyond the 3 that can already be flown on every lot all year round. So these are flags that would be considered temporary in nature and beyond the 3 already permitted. So there's 3 categories for discussion tonight. One is the length of time that additional temporary flags could be flown. The second is what's the right number of additional temporary flags that could be displayed at the same time. And the third is whether or not the city should regulate or exempt the small, tiny stick flags that often get stuck in the ground for holidays and special events. So each category that Joel's going to go over has several options to consider, and they're designed to gather your feedback, so that will help us craft an amendment to bring forward later this year. We've numbered and lettered those at the very end of the presentation to make it easier to discuss and give your feedback, and we're hoping to get feedback from all of you as we craft this. Thank you. Take on over, Joel.
So, having introduced that so appropriately, your input is expected. So be thinking while Joel does his presentation.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, Planning Commission and Aldermen. As Kelly has said, this last topic on our agenda item is a discussion of display of flags. As you all know, this may be a little bit more familiar. It's been a while since we talked about that, but for the Alderman present, I will just kind of highlight some of that discussion as well as the step taken. But just starting off with the background so we can have a refresher on this. Last fall, in October of 2024, as you all may know, a notice of violation was issued to a residential property owner for displaying a higher number of flags than what was permitted. And of course, prompted a BOMA work session discussion on the notice of violation procedure, as well as also the discussion of flag standards. At that meeting, BNS did present a review of the research and review of the other communities in the U.S. to see what flag standards existed for them and how they regulated those flags. And they looked at specific elements that are listed here: the maximum number of flags permitted, temporary flags, setbacks, height, and size restrictions. At the conclusion of that meeting, BOMA agreed that staff should do some additional research to see how these potential standards of other communities could be reviewed and potentially incorporated into our zoning ordinance. And so staff did draft some potential options to be presented later at another future joint conceptual workshop meeting, and that was the one that was held in March or spring of this year. As you all may remember, those amendment scenarios that were covered allowed for additional temporary flags based on holidays and special events, and they also exempted small stick flags. As Kelly mentioned, these options that were presented were to expand on our current standards to allow for additional temporary flags and have that additional flexibility. And this would be for both residential properties and commercial properties, and were to be content neutral. As we go further into this presentation, we did want to include this because of the discussion of flags, freedom of expression. We want to be able to remind Planning Commission as well as the general public that the purpose behind sign regulations is to uphold community character, avoid visual clutter, protect property values, and be content neutral. These guiding factors that we're touching on right now are reflected in our current standards, where we're just regulating the time, place, and manner of things, and we're being content neutral. But these guiding factors also help staff in our research and review of other communities and the proposed options that you all we're going to be seeing in a little bit. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is just kind of a summary of our current flag standards. We went over this with you all before previously, but just to kind of summarize, right now, 3 flags are permitted per lot, and these can be flown all year round. The maximum area for a flag is the maximum width of a flag that shall not exceed 1/4 the height of the pole. For setbacks, the minimum setback is that of the minimum setback at the property line. And for the height, the maximum of 40 feet from ground poles or 20 feet for rooftop poles. In addition to this, the City of Franklin does regulate temporary signs. There are 2 temporary signs allowed in all districts up to 3 months a year. One for commercial and storefront properties or tenant space up to 3 months per year. And these signs have their own regulations and standards, specifically regarding their size and their height, and as well as their duration period. We wanted to touch on this because it does kind of talk about, these temporary signs, but we're going to be specifically talking about flags, temporary flags, and regulations for those. So this is going to be something completely separate. We're not touching temporary signs. We're going to be focusing specifically on flags today. So as you all may recall, again, during that joint conceptual workshop meeting back in March, staff presented several amendment scenarios for your consideration. And these can be summarized here on these points here. It was considering exempting small stick flags under a specific size, consider adding a temporary flag sign type for holidays and special events, consider adding a maximum number of flags per pole, and consider adding a wall-mounted requirement to not exceed the height of the building. After that meeting, it was agreed that from the comments received during that meeting and afterwards, that there was support of allowing additional temporary flags, but with limits to avoid clutter. And that was seen especially around the conversation of small stick flags, especially the duration period. Having an unlimited duration period and unlimited number of quantity for them, there was some concern about having an unlimited amount for that. There was no support. There was a lesser support for the proposed duration for that specifically, and felt that it needed to be reduced to protect property values. There was also not strong reduction to reduce the maximum number of flags on a pole below 3, and there was some questions raised about the need for a wall-mounted flag requirement that addressed the placement above the building roof line. Based on the feedback received during that meeting, staff did make sure to revise these options in discussion today, and as Kelly mentioned, for this meeting, we kind of separated these out into 3 categories: flag duration, flag quantity, and small stick flags. Starting off first with the first category, flag duration, we presented these 3 options. The first option, no change, keeping and maintaining the status quo as it is today, allowing for 3 flags all year round, and then allowing for the number of temporary signs that is permitted for residential and commercial properties. Option 2, the option for federal holidays and floating events. This would allow for additional temporary flags for the 11 federal holidays and 4 floating events that it would be at the discretion of the property owner. And so this would work 3 days before the day of the event or the holiday that they are flying for it, and then the 2 days after the event. And they would not be able to exceed 90 days total in a calendar year with this option. For option 3, this would be flexible date with limits. So this would allow for additional temporary flags for up to 60 days in a calendar year, but no longer than 7 consecutive days. For flag quantity, for this category, we have 3 options as well. Option A would be no change, so again, maintaining the status quo with what is permitted today, the 3 flags total, plus the allowed quantity for temporary signs for residential and commercial properties. Option B would be 5 additional temporary flags. So this would be the 5 additional temporary flags allowed per property plus the 3 permanent flags that are allowed for a total of 8 flags allowed per property. Option C would be blank. We left this blank because staff wanted to be able to solicit your feedback to see if there's a more appropriate number, to see if you believe that there is something that's better than 5, if there's a better number for that. We definitely want to hear that feedback, so then again we can evaluate that and see what the next steps for that may be. And then for small stick flags, as we said, there was conversation that was had at that joint conceptual workshop meeting and the concerns on allowing an unlimited number and an unlimited duration for these. And so we wanted to bring this back to you all for this, as we do need some additional direction on this, on how we are to evaluate this and implement this moving forward, especially for crafting an amendment. There are some things to consider with this, and this is why we included this, because small stick flags are a little bit more unique than your typical temporary flag. The durability of these is they're not meant to be there very long, as well as the longevity of it. They're meant to be easily placed and just easily removed. And so these are just small stick flags, usually typically the size 10 by 12 or at the largest of 10 by 18. So they're meant to be, again, easily installed and easily removed. And then the other part of this that we wanted you all to consider with small stick flags is that it's really not an issue today. There has not been a known recent issue or violation notice for these small stick flags. There's really not an issue with the clutter. But if we do exempt this, one of the things we all want you to consider is that if this is exempted, it may become an issue later on in the future. But that's kind of why we wanted to have that additional discussion with you all regarding the matter of small stick flags. Some other notable changes that were proposed is prohibiting flags from encroaching into public right-of-way or someone else's property, as well as addressing wall-mounted flags on buildings for placement and size. This concludes our presentation that we have drafted for you all today to, again, solicit your feedback. We listed out the categories as well as the options for them so we can get your feedback on a specific option for each category, as well as, again, having the discussion around small stick flags. We did present this at the BOMA work session earlier this week on Tuesday for them to get us some feedback as well, and we did get some varied opinions on some things. One of the things that really was discussed further on was flag duration, the period of this, looking at the flexible dates with limits. There was some mixed opinions on wanting to have the maximum amount of flexibility to be able to have 60 days or 90 days to make it consistent with our current regulations for temporary signs. So seeing for that, what could be done to increase that maximum duration period. Additionally, there was not support on trying to, there were some varying levels of support and for trying to apply a specific number on the maximum quantity of flags, because there was some concerns over the unintended consequences of trying to apply a specific number of flags for a property owner. And so there was really, again, some varying opinions on not wanting to apply a specific number for that. And instead, rather having an unlimited number be allowed for flags under a specific size, as well as the small stick flags. And so hearing that feedback, we would love to get your opinion on this to see what you all believe is appropriate, the options that are available here, and to get some additional feedback in order for staff to get that direction to craft an amendment.
I would just add one more feedback that we got from the BOMO work session was to really look at residential lots versus commercial lots as potentially an exemption, maybe for temporary flags on residential lots, but not looking at to do that on commercial lots. So we did get that feedback as well.
And we would be open to hearing any further discussion on this.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm up, I guess.
Okay, Commissioner Williamson.
For duration, and I don't know, I think on this, like the neighborhood where I live in, a lot of people like to do seasonal flags. And so in some ways, some of them are on the side of the building, they're regular size. It's Easter, it's Christmas, it's not if it's not a holiday, it's a sports team, but they always keep their little flag filled, and they might have, United States of America flag up there. But then I also think of the flags that people can put in their yard, the little garden sign flags. And so I think I would be, for a duration, because I've seen like holiday flags that are done wonderfully, I would be concerned if we start to put a lot of restriction on duration on those. And if you're doing it only so many days before a holiday and so many days after, it kind of, yeah, I think about it in my neighborhood, it's not like the season, you know, people really get into the season of something. And so, you know, they might have Christmas is going to be, 40 days, you know, it's going to start well before December and stuff like that. So I think that's a hesitation I would have on the duration. If we start really, you know, hacking that down too much, it could be an over restriction. With the little stick flags, yeah, I think there's some sense in having those exempt. I know, having done those myself, usually don't have a problem with them getting too ugly because they kind of decompose into your lawn. They fall off, the stick turns gray, and it's gone unless you're putting them up every couple of days. So I see those as kind of self-eliminating in a way. And then the quantity, you haven't thought too much into the depth of that. I think some of it depends on lot size. If you have a really tiny lot and you pack it full of flags, your neighbors are going to have an issue. If you have a massive lot, there's lots of applications, and so I don't think I'm going to quite speak to that. So.
I guess what I want to know is, and where I'm having some concern, so I'm going to shoot in the dark here. Duration, I don't think, is my biggest concern. It's the number that I'm having a concern with here. Because I seem to recall seeing we had a graphic that had at least 300 small American flags in a yard. Concern. But let's go back, because I think when people hear flags, we think of the American flag, and everybody feels really, really good about that. But let's talk about, we say we don't want to restrict people's rights to have 10 flags in their yard if they want to. Sounds really, really nice, but we just had a 35-minute discussion about what materials that a developer could put on a building, what size windows, how far a window could be recessed. We had some people talking about modification of standards on a 1/3 inch recess. Let's think about this. An American flag sounds really good. A Christmas flag sounds really good. But if I wanted to put a Black Panther flag, 10 of them in my yard, some people might not like it. If someone wanted to put a gay pride flag, 10 of them in their yard, you might not like it. So let's talk about, we need to think about unintended consequences. Let's think about that. Property values, when we talk about having concrete on a building, talk about having pink paint on a building. Let's think about someone having 15 flags in their yard. We talk about restricting people's rights. 3 flags in a yard, I don't think that's going to hurt somebody. It may hurt your feelings, but it's not going to hurt your property values that much. So I think, you know, duration is one thing, but number of flags is something else. I'm not going to want my neighbor to have 8 flags in his yard, whether it's for 30 days or for 30 seconds, to be honest with you. I think the biggest concern for me is the number of flags. 3 flags, an American flag, a Tennessee flag, an Auburn flag. Won't hurt my foot. I prefer you to have a Vanderbilt flag. But I think what we really, really, in my opinion, should be concerned with is how many flags we allow. Now, then we can get to having the temporary flags and how many days and all of that. So it may be a flag you like. I think we might, as long as we like the flag, we'd be okay with it. But we got to realize that we can't tell them what kind of flags to put up once we allow them to have 10 or 15 flags. So that's something we better really, really think about. Once we say they can have 15, we can't tell them what kind it is. So I just think we really be careful. I'm supporting no change, but I'm just saying let's put it out there. So I'm going to hush, but I just think we better be careful about that. So okay, I'm done.
Okay, Commissioner Caesar?
Context, because I think Jennifer brought up a good point, Commissioner Williamson. You can still have 3 flags and they can fly every day of the year. So you could have, so that holiday flag could be one of your 3 permanents. So you wouldn't be restricted in that regard. You could make it one of those 3. So I just wanted to clarify that. We discussed this, and one of the questions that came up the other night in Bowman that I think is important for this group to hear is how many of these violations have we had since we put this ordinance in place? And I don't know if one of my Bowman colleagues remembers, but this went into place, was it 2014? Or was it before that?
Yeah.
Earlier.
Oh, yeah, it was much earlier.
It's been in effect since at least, I would say, 20 plus years, yeah.
And in 20 years of this ordinance being in place, there's been one issue. So just some additional context for the group.
Yeah. Alderman Berger.
Yeah, I got overwhelmed the other night. I said, yeah, this is getting convoluted here. I don't want to restrict on the number of American flags because you have people who are sending their daughters and sons off to the military, and they may want to put 20 signs in the yard, or they have 20 American flags in the yard the day they leave, or the week they leave, or when the week they come back, or whatever. So I have a problem restricting the number of American flags for anybody anywhere. The three flags, you know, I always thought of as the American flag, the state flag, and the city flag. And people could have those all day long, 365 days a year, and that's great. I was leaning towards option 3 on that, but you know, it just, to me, it's getting a little too convoluted, a little bit too, I don't even know how to explain it. I just think it's, I think we're digging ourselves in a hole to some extent, but also we're not even addressing the how the flag holds up. I mean, American flag, once it's torn, once it's dirty, it's supposed to be destroyed. We have rules about that. People don't learn those rules very well anymore. But also, if you're putting up flags and they're dirty and they're torn, I think they need to be addressed. So here's a few things I wrote down before. Balancing various interests and holiday events and happenings are important for people. Clarity and consistency, respect for the freedom of speech, which we are not going to regulate. They can say anything they want on these flags. Now, I would think that if there was the 5th word in the alphabet up there, the 5th letter in the alphabet up there with another letter up there, and so he's flying it in their yard, we'd have a problem with that. I think we'd have a problem with that throughout the whole city. So I think there are some regulations that we'd have in decency laws. At least I'd hope so. We need it easy to regulate. That's another thing. We don't need our people going out there trying to regulate. I don't want that to happen. And we talked about reasonable size, placements. How about illumination? And we even talked about illumination. Illumination and the condition of a flag, I don't think we've talked about at all. I have no problem. People want to put 100 little small sticky flags in their yard. I think that's fine, but I'm with Marshall. You know, what's the duration of that going to be? It might affect somebody. And if you try, just to put yourself into place. If you had somebody put 100 little sticky flags in their yard, no matter what it was, American flag, hi, how are you flag, I don't care what it was, and you had that in your yard 365 days a year, and you're trying to sell your house next door, who's living next door? Is this guy going to keep up his flags 365 days a year? So there's a lot of unintended consequences that I think we need to think about. And the condition of the flags, I think I mentioned that. I don't think.
Alderman Baggett.
Real quick, we did talk about this at BOMA, and I think Planning Commission, we had there was an issue, and I think it was, for some reason, there must have been a BNS inspector that went through and just had flags on the mind, and there was 3 or 4 violations there, maybe not 3 or 4, at least 2 that happened, and the small stick flags were part of it, and then there was a guy who had, for every holiday, put up some flags, like celebrating the holiday around his yard. He had done this for years, never gotten a violation notice, and then it's kind of like we tightened down on our flag ordinance, and so rightfully, I think this has been happening across the city. People have put up more than 3 flags. It's been happening, but they're not all, caught by the inspector. People do it. They want to put up little small stick flags, but technically you can't put up small stick flags. You've been breaking our ordinance if you've been doing that. Right, exactly. And so instead of having an ordinance that is consistently or inconsistently being applied or consistently being broken without knowledge, let's do something that is reasonable. That's what this was about. And so like the small stick flags, yes, just let people put up the stick flags. And then the temporary, you can't, as a Commissioner Allen said, can't regulate content. And so the 90-day duration, like, kind of encompasses more of what I think we have seen as like a common thing where people put up more short-term celebratory flags. Maybe they put up, whatever it is. And you're right. It doesn't matter what it is. We can't. But I think you can't just say. I think you got to allow people to express themselves. There's a little bit more than we're allowing now with the 90 days, 60 days, whatever it is. If you want to put a number on the total flags, that's fine, I guess. I wouldn't agree with it for the temporary flags. But you give a short amount of time so people aren't just out there breaking the ordinance. You get a note on your door because you put up 4 American flags, for 4th of July, and all of a sudden you're breaking an ordinance because you put up some flags. It's not just the American flags. It could be any holiday. So this was just to give, I think, a little bit more flexibility for freedom of speech. Again, knowing that people can put up flags that you don't like. But there's a duration limit for throughout the year that I think gives people who want to do this the freedom to do that. And it's not like they're going to be up there all year round. So property values, they got 90 days for the whole year, 60 days, 30 days, whatever you decide. So that was the spirit behind this. It wasn't trying to have a flag free for all. It's just that we have people are currently breaking our ordinances now and don't know it, and we're not catching them, and that's okay. So some of that might be okay, is what I think this was about.
Yes, some of this is addressing the flexibility for some of those more short-term flags that are put up at property owners' discretion. What we'd really like to get your feedback on is a time frame for those extra flags. This is beyond the first 3 flags plus 2 temporary flags that you can or temporary signs that you can have on your property 3 months out of the year. So this is in addition to all of that. Extra flags, is 60 days the right number? Is 90 days the right number? Do you have a preference for that kind of duration?
Yeah, a week. Yes.
90 is too long, in my opinion. 30 to 60, 90 is too long, in my opinion.
That's for the whole year. 90 days is for the
Oh, for the whole year?
Yeah, Commissioner, 90 days would be pretty consistent with.
So we can,
Commissioner McLemore.
we can already have 3 per year. So if I wanted to put, we had some Juneteenth flags out. So if I wanted to put a whole bunch of temporary flags out for Juneteenth, in my mind, I think there should be a time frame on that. I don't need to have them out for 90 days. It needs to be, the holiday has been celebrated and we have the flags out. And I would say no more than, 30 to 60, but not 90. Because
there was
we're
a
going over into some more holidays. Then we may be going over into Halloween.
Well, what are you doing about the flags that are on the wall? Because I noticed that was in one of your illustrations.
Yes, we did propose that, and that's why we also wanted to entertain that to see what you all thought about that. There was some discussion about not exceeding the height of the roof, the roof line, the building, the roof line, and then also not letting it extend out to into the right of way. But we did want to see that feedback to see is that something you are okay with? It doesn't really explicitly have that language right now in the zoning ordinance, but that's kind of why we wanted to see and get your additional feedback on that, if you think that's necessary.
And what we're thinking about, because the way the flag requirements are right now, they don't really address, as Joel said, wall-mounted flags very well. So we were looking at perhaps adding a standard to the ordinance that allows a standard American flag size of a flag, which is a 5x8 flag that's mounted on the side of a building. Of course, content is not looked at. It could be any flag, but just in terms of size, we're looking at.
Alderman Bergen?
I want to know, do we have a problem with that now? I mean, I just feel like we're trying to regulate stuff we don't even have a problem with. And, you know, like government's regulating more things, putting more things in there when we don't have to.
It's that it doesn't work quite right to address any wall-mounted flags, so.
Well, maybe we don't address it, period. I don't think, what I'm saying is I'm not sure, I'm not picking on you, Kelly. I'm just saying, I don't know if we necessarily have to address wall flags. Is there a reason to? Maybe we do that if there's a problem later on and we go, hey, we're having problems with wall flags. Well, what would that be? I don't know. The other
Chair.
thing is, I don't think we need to regulate the commercial because there's a car dealership has a big old American flag flying 365 days a year and they need to stay there.
Chair,
I don't know if we're giving you the kind of feedback you need.
how are they going to regulate it if it's not written?
20 years ago, there was a flag war out in my neighborhood because a man put a permanent flagpole with floodlights on it to fly his American flag. And it was a violation of the HOA requirement. It was a violation of the bylaws. And it resulted in weeks of agonizing discussion. He eventually put a flag on his front of his garage attached to the wall, and he can fly that flag all day long, every day, year round, and nobody cares.
Can't regulate anything that's not written though, so I think we have to give them the guidance they're asking for. So you can't regulate it if it's not written. So I would say to you, and you had asked this before, and I think we kind of said that, you said you didn't want it over the roof line for it to be the size of an American flag, just like the others that we'd said before would be my opinion.
I would say this has been helpful too. You know, this is, the clear direction is flexibility, but in a way that doesn't have that overreach and in a way that's not so complex. I think that's been sufficient direction for staff to go off of.
Yeah, okay. All right. Is there any other business? Seeing none, we are adjourned.